And now we will be taking our audience to Machu Picchu with a wonderful presentation by a distinguished pair, Kenneth and Ruth Wright. Their presentation is entitled On Machu Picchu, Road Construction, Technology, and Water Management. Our Quechua compadres speak of the power of duality. The warmi kari is something that I've been asked about, and that means the woman-man being. The pioneering couple of Ken and Ruth Wright is a true scholarly warmi kari duo in the task, the cargo of research and interpretation of major Inca sites. Specifically, they investigated the sophisticated hydrology and hydraulics in such iconic Inca sites as Machu Picchu, Tipon, Moray, and currently Ollanytaytambo. The mysterious and resilient Machu Picchu, built to last, resistant to erosion, resistant to earthquake, is their focus today. The list of accolades for the work of this pioneering couple, as you can read in your programs, is long indeed. So briefly, Engineer Kenneth Wright is the founder of Wright Water Engineers of Denver, Colorado. His company conducts and assists paleohydrological research in Peru, Mesa Verde, southern France, Pompeii, Olympia, Thailand, Cambodia, and China. Ruth Wright is the vice president of Wright Paleohydrological Institute and is active in water resources policy and field research. As a former member of the Colorado House of Representatives, 14 years total, 6 as House Minority Leader, Ruth Wright has strongly supported the wise use of natural resources. I believe this partly explains her strong attachment to Inca engineering. They have been awarded many honorary degrees, as you can read again, no need to recite. Most tellingly, Kenneth and Ruth Wright received the Order of Merit from the President of Peru for their scholarly contribution to Peruvian people and to Peruvian scholarship. Ken, Ruth Wright.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to take you, Ruth and I are going to take you to a stretch of the Inca Road in the vicinity of Machu Picchu. And we're going to start out at a wonderful place called Winiwena and end up going through Machu Picchu down to the Urubamba River. But first of all, I want to tell you where Machu Picchu is. It's Peru at about 8,000 feet high. And it is not too high, that is, and it is 13 degrees south of the equator. It was built likely starting in about 1450 AD, with the end of construction in the 1530s, a very short period of time, roughly 90 years. And with that, we're going to go on to the Inca Road. And the Inca Road, as far as Machu Picchu is concerned, it represents to us not just a road and a path, but a connection between important points. For instance, we're going to start at Winiwena, a spectacular site with beautiful fountains, and the waterfall in the background. When we look at that a little closer, you'll see what a gorgeous place it is. The Inca Trail goes through Winiwena, Winiwena being a way stop, like a hotel, along the Inca Trail from Cusco to Machu Picchu. And Winiwena is an overnight rest stop. Taking a look at the trails that we're going to, in the vicinity of Machu Picchu, we see off the bottom of the slide is the location of Winiwena, but the green trail is the main road itself, and we're going to go to Intipunku and down to Machu Picchu, and then around Machu Picchu to what we call the east flank down to the Urubamba River. This gives you an idea of the Inca Trail leading up to a saddle, a point called Intipunku, and here Ruth is going to take you the rest of the way to Machu Picchu.
This is Intipunku, the Gate of the Sun, and from this point on you can have a great view of Machu Picchu coming in from Cusco. The Inca Road in this area is really very special. It was said that there's 25,000 miles of Inca Road. Not all as beautiful as this. This is where the Inca and his Koya, his queen, would be carried in from Cusco to their royal retreat. What you have here is a number of chasqui, at least that's what I call them. The chasqui in the Inca Empire were the runners and the messengers, sort of like our Pony Express, powerful runners that could run from one station to the next and then deliver whatever was being delivered to the next person to keep going. They're still a proud breed. Now they are not messengers for the Inca, but they are very important for tourism. They carry the goods and things that the tourists need when they do the Inca Trail. In the background is what's known as Waka 17. It is a group of buildings that most of the tourists just sort of zip right on through, but we, of course, were very interested in everything that the Inca did. And here you see the buildings. Excuse me, whoops, went too far. And the first thing you see is a giant waka, which is imbued with the spirits of the gods, where ceremonies could be held. And of course, you always have the great view of the mountains and the valley. Machu Picchu was not chosen because it was an easy site. It was chosen because it had everything. It had the river surrounding it. It had the mountains, the apus of the gods of the mountains. The sun, Inti, always there, had the rains for the agriculture. And so it was a site chosen, we understand, by Pachacuti himself. And he actually was very interested in seeing that it was developed in the proper way. Everybody just zips right on through the site, as we did early on, and then we noticed that there was this very wide Grandest Stairway, which just ended into the forest. At a certain point, we said, the Incas would not just have built a Grandest Stairway this beautiful and this wide, going nowhere. So we got the permission to cut down some of the greenery, and just a few feet above, there was this Inca stairway going up to a viewing station. Here we are clearing the station. That's the stairway on the right, with Ken taking pictures. One of the things that you could see from there, obviously, is Machu Picchu. It had a 180-degree view up the trail, down the trail, and this would be a fabulous view of Machu Picchu itself. After we were finished looking at this and measuring and so forth, I just want to point out a few things that you've just seen. One of them is the waka itself, the stone. Whoops, sorry. Got to get used to this. There we are. Which is down here. That's the stone that I was sitting on, the stairway that goes into the forest. Just a little ways up, we found this viewing station where you could see Machu Picchu and everywhere up the trail, and then a trail which went up to Machu Picchu and beyond. So this was an important junction. The security station would mean that they could guard from people. They'd know exactly who was coming in and out and who was eventually going into Machu Picchu. Coming down from there, you can see the beautiful the road. This has not been reconstructed. This is the paving. You have on one side you have the retaining wall, and then on the other side the drop down to the valley. Coming down that particular trail, you can see a very huge overhanging rock in the background. This is that rock, and if you stand really close to it, in fact, it's sort of, you can hear the roar of the Urubamba River. It's quite impressive. But what was here, and what Hiram Bingham found, it was a small cemetery, which again, one of those things along the Inca Trail you wouldn't expect. And one of the things they found was a very special burial, a woman buried with her dog, who was a Kali type, and then some artifacts. The pottery on the right is the pottery which still exists. In fact, was in the Yale exhibit. It's about 8 inches high, and because it was protected in a grave, it is absolutely perfect. Further down the Inca Trail, almost to the point where you get into Machu Picchu, there is a drainage facility, and from the left, it drains a fairly large watershed. There are terraces on both sides of the drain, and you can see the man below the drain. Damn. Right there. So the drain comes through the Inca Road. Again, a way of taking care of the 80 inches of rainfall that you have at Machu Picchu. The remarkable thing is, if you look at it from above, you can see that there's a stairway. It's a little too. It's big enough for the Inca. The size of the Incas they were very small. They didn't have to crawl through this. They could almost walk through it. And then you have, this is the upper end, and then you can see the lower end. And remarkably, you go to the lower end, and this is what you see. The Incas loved their landscape, and it's been said that they treated it like a jeweler would treat a gem, embellishing it but not in any way destroying its beauty. So there you have Mount Putacusi, another holy mountain. And you can say, well, this just happened, but we rather doubt it because it's so perfectly framed by the drain. So this is an overview of Machu Picchu taken from Huayna Picchu, and you can see the Inca Trail coming down, the famous guardhouse, and a junction for the trail which takes you over this way to what they call the Inca Drawbridge. And you can see Machu Picchu spread out like a quilt over the area. This is known as a graben. It's between Machu Picchu Mountain and Huayna Picchu Mountain, which back in geologic times came up and the graben dropped. So it is a very porous landscape, and was the reason you could have a spring that would be able to pick up the water, and but it was a very difficult place to build. This shows the beautiful way that the Inca used the landscape. Instead of just pounding it down and doing what they wanted with it, they embellished it, and they used the natural landscape, and it's not only aesthetically beautiful, but also the sustainability. You could, instead of changing the landscape, you just embellished it, but you kept its natural features. In the background, you have the famous Mount Yanantin. And Putacusi is the round thing that you just saw through the drainage hole. This was the guard station there. Again, could be seen from everywhere in Machu Picchu, and it could see everything in Machu Picchu. On the right, you have the famous flying steps that are built right into the wall so that the Incas could quick run from one terrace to another. This is the one that goes to the famous drawbridge. The trail itself would probably go to Yactapata, which is a fairly new discovery. Hiram Bingham found it, but the location was really not perfectly decided until about 6 or 8 years ago, and they found that there's at least a visual relationship between Yactapata on one side of the Urubamba River and Machu Picchu on the other. So this would be an important trail. But they didn't want to let people come in if they didn't want them to, so it is a drawbridge. And there's the drawbridge. It drops down precipitously on one side and has about a 1,000 foot of cliff above it. And if they wanted to close it, they just pulled up the wood. There we go. Excuse me. This is the view of Machu Picchu at sunrise, which is absolutely spectacular. One of the finest views you would ever could imagine. Here we call this the Sleeping City. The main gate is right here. It's the one major entrance to Machu Picchu, and here is a close-up of that gate. And once again, the gate perfectly frames the holy mountain of Huayna Picchu.
Well, what we're looking at is the doorway, the main doorway into Machu Picchu, and it would be what would have been thought previously as perhaps the end of the Inca Trail from Cusco to Machu Picchu. But it is illogical for the trail to stop at that point. So what we were interested in doing was finding out if there was an extension of the trail down to the Urubamba River and then a trail that would then head off into towards the Amazon. Here we see a bypass trail around Machu Picchu, so the travelers did not have to go through this royal estate. You'll see the granite stairways on the right that are roughly 9 feet wide. It's a grand staircase leading into the rainforest. Our job then with Alfredo of Valencia, our local archaeologist from Cusco, and workers from Denver, was to try to find out where this trail might be lying. And looking over the countryside, we concluded that it would likely have to end roughly at that edge of the river on the left bank, just because beyond that were cataracts, which were very dangerous. So what we found was that, yes, it did terminate at that point, and we'll show you how we got there. First of all, we started out thinking that the best way of accessing the trail would be crossing the Urubamba River. One of the things we discovered quickly was that it was too dangerous. The swift water rose during the day, and when we returned in the evening, we had a tough time making sure we didn't get washed down into the cataracts. So instead of accessing the potential trail from below, we accessed it from above, along the outer wall of Machu Picchu, heading down through the thick forest, through a clearing that we had made around the bend. This was not the Inca Trail at all. It was just merely our access route to try to find the trail. There was lots of work by local macheteros that we hired in Aguas Calientes, good workers, people who are descendants of the Inca and speak the Inca language. What we're able to do by using machetes and probing into the forest duff was to go down the fall line of the slope, which was a roughly 2-to-1 slope, and probe with the machete until there was a loud clink of steel on stone, and then it would be stripped off, and if it was just a random boulder, it was neglected. But most of the time it was this trail, and that's how we were able to find the trail winding down this steep incline. The rock, it's granite rock that's local. It didn't have to be hauled very far. About a third of the way down the trail, we came across ceremonial fountains. And you see here, shortly after clearing, this is one of the highlights of the whole trail experience for us. But these were ceremonial fountains along the trail to provide drinking water for people traversing, traveling on the trail. After it was cleared, we realized that the fountains were similar to the ceremonial fountains in Machu Picchu itself and at Winiwena, with niches and channels leading into that would spout out, allowing for filling of water jugs, and then granite basins below. After we cleared it and then finally dug out the channel, the original Inca channel coming out of the ground, the fountain immediately sprung into action, and this is likely about maybe 10 minutes after the water began flowing because it's still cloudy. It didn't take long to clean up and turn into good, high-quality drinking water for our crews. This set of fountains, both what we call 3 and 4, it wasn't just a drinking fountain area. There was a stairway adjacent to the fountains leading up to a platform. And the platform would be a place where the traveler would be able to sit, rest, drink his water, and look at a view. One of the most spectacular views, we think, in all of South America, with Mount Yanantin in the background, which is a holy mountain even today. On the right-hand side is the Putacusi Mountain, also holy, and on the left is the holy mountain of Huayna Picchu. The line across the center is not a scratch on the negative, but an archaeological string line. Anyway, we concluded this must be one of the finest views in all of South America, and right along the Inca Trail. And it gave you an idea that the Inca Trail was a lot more than just a means of going from one place to the other. It was a roadway that tied the empire together and had enormous numbers of infrastructure works along the way. We continued on down below the fountains and found another fountain, number 5, a total of 6 in all. This was a fountain that was fed by a stream of water coming out of a tunnel that had been excavated into the solid granite. Looking at the trail, this trail area from up above, after the government agency did much more clearing, you'll see a work area in the center, and that's where the fountains are located. The actual trail came through the forest, made a hard right turn to the north, continued on past the fountains, and then along through the bottom of the picture, and then into the trail, continuing of the trail. What we're seeing here is infrastructure to support the trail. The trail was built on very steep ground, and without the proper foundations and planning, it would not have lasted. But the Inca built for eternity. They had a high standard of care. Notice the extensive foundation work. In effect, they're terraces, but they're built to support the trail. And we call this a fine example of soil stewardship aimed towards sustainability. I'm going to show you this stairway here. It's not part of the Inca Trail. It is merely a side stairway to serve, to provide access maintenance to the terraces. And of course, one of the things we realize as engineers, one of the most important things about this whole study of the road, and as well as Machu Picchu itself, is the importance of operation and maintenance. When something is built, it has to be maintained or it is no longer there. That stairway I told you about, it leads down serving the terraces on the right and left. Down below is the Urubamba River, 1,600 feet down, a tributary to the Amazon. And then in the upper right, you'll see the fault, the Machu Picchu fault, that was created the topography upon which Machu Picchu was constructed. I talked a little bit about terraces. One of the things about the Inca is that they can teach modern engineers a lot about building terraces. What we have here is what modern geotechnical engineers would call an inverse filter. We have topsoil, sometimes as thick as a meter, that'd be 3 feet, or 1.5 meters of topsoil, rich topsoil for the crops. And at Machu Picchu, they grew maize, so they could make corn beer for religious ceremonies. Beneath the topsoil would be sand, and then sandy gravel, small rocks. The idea being is that they wanted the water to go down, not horizontal and erode. They were masters at doing filters and constructing terraces that endured for century after century. And we know at Machu Picchu the terraces existed because when Hiram Bingham rediscovered Machu Picchu in 1911 and then cleared it in 1912, all the terraces were whole as they exist today. The only failures he reported were 2 failures along the canal that was provided the water supply. When we talk about the trail, we talk about granite beauty, stairways. Notice the wide stairway in the background, the trail coming along, protected by a sturdy wall on the right-hand side, a retaining wall. The workmen were delighted to be participating in this wonderful adventure of excavating the trail and clearing it and finding the fountains. And the trail itself comes from behind down these stairways, makes a right-angle jog, with the fountains being over on the right-hand side. One of the things that we liked a lot was the beauty of granite stairways. This one happens to be 9 feet wide, a granite stairway, never repaired or touched for 500 years, and all the stones in perfect location, and the stairway just as good as it was the day it was built back around 1500 or so, some 500 years ago. Down further, we came across supporting walls. This was what we called a huge curved wall, and nothing more than to provide a right-of-way for this important Inca trail that was the extension of the main trail from Cusco to Machu Picchu. At the very bottom, well, not quite at the bottom, but almost at the bottom at the river landing, we came across a solid granite stairway over here, and into the granite was carved 14 stairs. So in situ rock, the natural granite is on the right-hand side, and then a retaining wall to provide a support for the trail that is then up above. At the river landing, we found the walls that the Inca built all those years ago, and somehow, miraculously, these stones have withstood the roaring river, Urubamba River, and it is a roaring river during much of the year. The landing, the trail itself came down on the left-hand side, and then there was a wonderful landing here, and that's where we lost the trail. We looked for a bridge, but could not find the abutments or any remains of a bridge. We know that it would have crossed the Urubamba upstream of the cataract, across to the trail that would have been on the right bank where the railroad is now located. We surveyed, as civil engineers do, to measure widths, estimate, so we can compute widths of the river and estimate the velocity and the high water lines and just gather other hydrologic data. Note the smooth rocks at the bottom give you an idea of the granite rocks being washed by the river and deposited from time to time, then huge rocks over on the left. Our crew, I'd mentioned Alfredo of Valencia, the man who, after graduating from the university in Cusco, took a job as a resident archaeologist at Machu Picchu. He's in the center. He's sort of a hero to us. The rest is part of, it's about half of our crew for this particular job. But Alfredo of Valencia worked for us for nearly 20 years until he passed away a couple of years ago. But he knew more about Machu Picchu than any other human being alive, on the basis of his interest in the Inca and then being on site for 5 years at Machu Picchu. As engineers and surveyors, we did a detailed survey of the new trail. And here you see it starting up at Machu Picchu, sloping very uniformly from top to bottom for a drop of roughly 1,500 or 1,600 feet, and a remarkable steady grade from top to bottom, with the Urubamba River being over on the right-hand side where we just left. This aerial photograph taken by the U.S. Air Force in 1963 provided a basis for us to show how this trail extension from Machu Picchu, and Machu Picchu is situated in the center of the photo, and we show a white line going down. That is the Inca Trail leading down to the Urubamba River. One of the nice things about this photo is it shows how the Urubamba River encircles Machu Picchu, and one of the reasons why it was selected by the Inca Emperor Pachacuti as a site for his royal estate, because it had the river and it had the mountains where the Inca gods lived, and also lived in, it provided a perfect setting for a religious site for the royal estate. We look back, and here this wonderful fountain, at the moment of it being reactivated after 500 years of sleeping under the topsoil and debris of the east flank. And we show here a Quechua Indian from Aguas Calientes. He was so impressed with the fountain springing into life that he asked to say a prayer in Quechua language. And what he did was dig a hole in the foreground and took part of his lunch and buried it after he prayed to the mountain gods in Putucusi, Huayna Picchu, Machu Picchu, and Mount Yanantan. And then finally, he thanked Pachamama, the Earth Mother, for making the fountain flow, and asked the Earth Mother to keep the fountain flowing forever. Then we came back, Ruth and I came back in 6 months later. By that time, the vegetation had begun to regrow and take over the site once again. And here, Ruth is pointing to a very interesting hydraulic example. And notice the channel. What the Inca did, they knew that sometimes there would not be much water, and they wanted to make sure that the people could fill their water jugs. So they shaped the channel in such a way that the water would actually speed up. When it got to the end, it would then spout out so that it could be used for filling a jug. And that's what Ruth is pointing at there. It's known as the Venturi principle that's used by modern engineers for measuring water. Again, this is 6 months later after the vegetation began taking over, but the water was so pure that it could be drunk by our crew, and it was wonderful tasting water. And it's a good example, I think, of what we call sustainability. Here the Inca built a fountain back some 500 years ago. Then it became covered with earth and leaves and forest litter and buried, lost to knowledge, modern knowledge. And when it was uncovered and the channel of fountain cleared, it sprung into action, running as good as it did 500 years ago. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that part of the Inca Trail that I wanted to show you as an example of what the Inca were capable of doing and how they built a highway that stretched over some 24, 25 1,000 mile, 25,000 miles. Thank you.
No questions now.